Hello, everyone. Today we have Daphne Owen, the Assistant Medical Director at Puentes de Salud. Hi, Daphne. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Could we begin with a brief introduction on Puentes de Salud and the work that you do there?
Sure. So again, my name is Daphne Owen. I'm an emergency medicine physician here in Philly, and I volunteer at Puentes de Salud, where I've been for the last 10 years, and I am the assistant medical director there. So Puentes de Salud is a nonprofit health and wellness center here in South Philadelphia that provides healthcare and social services to mostly Spanish-speaking uninsured patients who live in South Philly.
So we're beginning the vaccine rollout here in Philadelphia, and there is a lot of mistrust surrounding the vaccine. And this is especially true amongst communities of color. Now, part of what's fueling the mistrust around the vaccine is the numerous conspiracy theories that started to become really prevalent since the beginning of the pandemic. But there's also a lot of concerns surrounding the fact that the vaccine was developed very quickly, and there is a sort of general lack of understanding around the scientific developments that allowed for the development of the mRNA vaccine. Could you talk to us a little bit about the vaccine, explain to us how it works, explain to us how it's different?
Sure. So this is a new kind of vaccine, an mRNA vaccine. However, it's not brand new. The concept for the mRNA vaccine has been around for a number of years, and actually some of the work was done to develop mRNA vaccines initially here in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania. And so this work has been done for a couple of years, and there was actually vaccines, mRNA-specific vaccines created for the flu, as well as rabies, and a couple of other infectious diseases several years ago. They just never really took off because the demand wasn't there. And so when it came to COVID, for the first time in many, many years, there was a huge amount of money, resources from the government and private business to develop a vaccine safely and quickly. And so this mRNA technology was used for the first time on a mass scale, but again, it had been around, used, tested in the past. So the two vaccines that we currently have approved, the Pfizer and the Mrna vaccines, are both mRNA vaccines. And what's very important to understand is that both of these vaccines use a piece of mRNA, or a small type of DNA, from the COVID virus, but it does not contain the COVID virus in whole. It does not contain live COVID virus. And so it's impossible to actually get a COVID infection from the vaccine itself. And basically what this technology does is the COVID virus has a spike protein, which you may have heard of, and the vaccine shows your body a little bit of this spike protein so that your body will recognize that if it sees it in the future and attack it. And the really good news about the vaccine is, while it was developed faster than we've ever developed a vaccine, like I said, it relies on technology that's been around for, a couple of years, been tested before, and no steps were skipped. So this vaccine has gone through the same kind of testing and trials that are done for every other vaccine and medicine that we have, just that the steps were done in tandem at the same time rather than one after another after another. And so I agree, this was done quickly, and that's something that's new for us and something that can seem scary, but it's important to remember that no steps were skipped, and that this vaccine has been developed and tested under the same kinds of careful watch from the FDA and the government that exists for other vaccines.
That's really comforting. It's interesting too, when you talk about the timeline being sped up because steps were happening concurrently, right? Mm-hmm. So that I feel like that's really important. Then the big question is, I feel like you've addressed this already, but the question is whether or not the vaccines are safe. And it sounds to me like they are, right? So people can sort of, how I don't know, how do you convince people that that this is safe, right? That they should get, that it is the right thing to get this vaccine?
Right. And I want to say that I think, having some hesitancy or concern is totally normal, because this is a scary time. None of us have been through a pandemic before. There's so much that's changed in our lives. And so I think wanting to know about the vaccine and wanting to be reassured about it is a normal thing. And so I think everybody should do their research, and I'm happy to help however I can here. So as far as safety of the vaccine, there's a couple of things that I think are helpful to know for the general public. So the first is that, as I said, the vaccines, both the Pfizer and Moderna, have gone through rigorous testing that's been, overseen by the FDA, where more than 40,000 people have received the vaccines and be closely studied. At this point, in addition, after those studies, more than 10 million people in the United States have now gotten their vaccines, like me. And so I think that's another reassuring thing, is that, not only do we already have 40,000 people who are in the trial, but we have now millions who've received the vaccine and, done well. So to go into a little bit more specifics about what we know, in the 40,000 or so people who were involved in the trials, we know that the vaccine, both Pfizer and Moderna, were effective. So nobody who received the actual vaccine became very sick with COVID, requiring hospitalization, and nobody who got the vaccine died from COVID. And that's huge, right? Because at this point that we've had more than 500,000 people in this country die from COVID, to have that kind of protection, 94% effectiveness, is really, really great. The other important thing is that there were no serious bad outcomes in the people who received the vaccine. We know that there's some reports of people having allergic reactions. These are things that are easy to be treated, and why people are watched after they get the vaccine. But nobody died from getting the vaccine. Nobody had any serious kinds of side effects that, impacted their life in a important way. And so I think that's really important to know from the study, that we see in these 40,000 people, the vaccine worked well and it was safe. And now kind of looking into where we are in a larger sense in the country, where millions of people have gotten the vaccines, we don't have any evidence that there's been deaths resulting from the vaccine or any other kinds of serious outcomes. And again, that's really important when we know that, 500,000 people have died from COVID and nobody's died from the vaccine. So I think that should help to be reassuring that this is a safe vaccine, and one that is going to work to help protect us from how bad we know that COVID is.
So what kind of side effects can people expect from the vaccine?
That's a great question. So the most common side effect that we see after the vaccine is some achiness, muscle pains, even fever, and just feeling a little bit sick, usually for only about a day or so. It seems to be that people have those reactions more commonly after the second than after the first dose. And again, it's impossible to get COVID from the vaccine itself. So having a fever or some muscle aches after the vaccine actually just kind of tells you that your body's responding to the vaccine and that it's working, rather than, that you're getting sick from the vaccine itself, getting a COVID infection, because that's impossible. Some people have no reactions or side effects at all. And again, the most common ones are fatigue, fever, muscle ache, headache, things like that. Again, short-lived, typically less than 24 hours.
Where can Philadelphians access the vaccine? What does the vaccine rollout look like here in our city?
That's a good question. So vaccine rollout in the United States is being done on a local level. So each state and county has its own way that it's distributing the vaccine. That means that each state and county doing its own process can be a little bit slow, and each one has its own different regulations and rules about who qualifies when. At this point, Philadelphia is distributing vaccines at a number of different locations, and the city on their public health website has information on all of the locations where one can currently get a vaccine and who is eligible. At this point, people who are 65 years and older are eligible to get a vaccine, or people who work in some high-risk kinds of professions, like in the restaurant industry, in education, public transportation, or other kinds of situations where they have a lot of, face-to-face interaction with other people. There is a number of efforts going on right now that have been really successful. The Black Doctors Consortium has been doing vaccine events at a number of different locations throughout the city. The Department of Public Health is also doing their own vaccines, and some smaller clinics and pharmacies are doing vaccines as well. So the best thing to do is go to the Philadelphia Department of Public Health website and check there for the most up-to-date information about who qualifies at this point in time and where you can go to get a vaccine. You also can sign up on the city website to be on an interest list or wait list to be contacted when potentially it's your time and the city can offer you a vaccine.
Great. Then the other question that I have, this maybe is a little bit more esoteric, projecting into the future a bit, but I know that, part of the vaccination process is that once we have enough people, a certain percentage of people vaccinated, we do reach that point of herd immunity. Mm-hmm. And we're, hopefully expecting for life to go, in quotes, like back to normal in some way. And I'm wondering what the timeline for that is, and then also what kind of obstacles we're facing that are keeping us from achieving this herd immunity.
Those are great questions. I think that at this point in time, it's hard to say for sure when we're going to go back to normal. But as you said, a lot of it depends on how quickly we can get a large portion of the country immunized against COVID. Many experts at this point think that sometime by the middle or end of the summer, Americans, anybody living in the United States who wants a vaccine will have had the opportunity to get one. And hopefully that means that before the end of 2021, we can start to have reached the point where enough people have gotten the vaccine that we have what's called herd immunity, and it's not easy for the vaccine to spread and infect people because so many people are now immune. So I'm hopeful that next we can celebrate going into 2022 back to normal, and potentially even sooner if we can, do a good job of rolling out the vaccine to everybody who wants and needs it. And I think that this is going to require a couple of different kinds of efforts. Large vaccination events are going to be important to get people vaccinated, but also there's groups that are a little bit harder to reach or may find it difficult to get to those kinds of venues. And so there's also efforts to reach into more vulnerable communities or harder to reach communities, and even go door to door or to meet people where they're at and try to offer the vaccine in a way that's accessible to everybody.
Thank you so much, Daphne, for all the valuable information that you gave us today. I think there's still a lot of questions, but I feel like we've addressed a lot of them here, and our audience will find it very helpful. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. And I think I'll say, for myself, as I said, I'm a physician. I work in the emergency room outside of my work at Prentice. And, I think what I'll tell people from my own experience is that I've really seen how devastating COVID can be. I've taken care of people my own age with COVID who died in front of me from the infection, and just seeing how terrible it can be to families. And I, also felt a little bit hesitant about the vaccine in the beginning, and really did my research, and for myself realized that it was something that I could do, to get the vaccine. Not only was it safe and effective, but by getting it myself, I could not only protect me and my family, who I come home to every day, but also the patients that I take care of, my community, and that maybe by people like me getting the vaccine, we can move back towards normalcy and get out of a lot of the really challenging economic problems that have come along with COVID. So many people in Philadelphia, and especially in minority communities, have really suffered as a result of the economic consequences of this. And so, getting vaccinated to me is not just about protecting my health, but also about trying to help our community get back to where we all want to be.